With 5 weeks to go until free agency, there's one player that the Penguins should target should he get there.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on Twitter at Synonym for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So I can't believe that free agency is only 5 weeks away at this point, and it's going to be here before I know it, before you know it, before anyone that's listening to/watching the show knows it. And we've done some free agent profiles on some players who are going to be hitting the market that the Penguins should consider going after. And we're going to continue that series today with one from the Vancouver Canucks. This is a player that I think would fit the Penguins' bottom six beautifully, and that is Dakota Joshua. He had the best season of his career in 2023-2024. 18 goals, 32 points, and then he was great in the playoffs for the Canucks. 4 goals, 8 points in 13 games. He only made $825,000 for this year. So you know he's going to be looking for a pretty big raise on the open market. But this is a player that can score, he can skate. He also brings that ratty element that the Penguins also need outside of Michael Bunting. He would become a fan favorite in probably 15 minutes. If you ask me, he is the exact type of player that the Penguins should be targeting for their bottom six. And yes, I understand that he shot 21.4% this year. That is a career high for him. But last year, he still shot 15.4%, and he had a pretty sound year. So if you can get him to shoot in that maybe 17 to 18 to 19% range, so somewhere in the middle of these last 2 years, you should be able to get 14, 15, 16, maybe even more goals from him for the Penguins. He's also only 28 years old right now, so you don't even really need to give him that much term. If you sign him to a 3 to 4 year contract, that would work with me. I'm going to get into the data in just a second, but Pat, we discussed this before we started recording today. That is a slam dunk move if you can get him to sign once free agency starts.
He really is. And I'll be honest, I fell in love with the guy during the Vancouver Canucks run in the postseason. Hadn't really heard of him up until the playoffs. And the way he was performing for the Vancouver Canucks, especially in the playoffs, I was under the impression that he was going to be with them for at least another year. It didn't feel like a player that was going to be headed to market. And then the other thing is, and I know this is basically at this point a subjective stat, but he led all forwards and hits up to the point of the Canucks being eliminated in the postseason. And you can see that. And I know a lot of times people say, oh, hits mean you don't have the puck, but you already talked about his top line statistics in the playoffs. Solid bottom six contributor. And as for the shooting percentage thing, I mean, I wouldn't be too worried about this guy in his shooting percentage because he only really became a consistent NHL player in the 22-23 season when he played 79 games for the Canucks. That season, he scores 11 goals, but shoots 15%. Yeah. And then this year, he increases to 18 goals, and his shooting percentage goes up to 21.4%. Now, I don't think he'll shoot at that level consistently, but like you said, 14, 15, 16%. I mean, the way this guy plays the game, not afraid to go to the dirty areas, not afraid to shoot the puck, not afraid to get physical. Players like that often do have a solid shooting percentage simply because they don't shoot a lot. They take the chances they get, and when they get them, they bury them. Think Michael Bunting, think Patrick Hornquist, think this is going to be a bit of a stretch, but hear me out, Chris Kunitz. Like, Chris Kunitz had the added advantage of playing with a guy like Sidney Crosby, but You think about Chris Kunitz, he wasn't a guy who just crossed the blue line, fired it at the net. He got himself to scoring places and scored. So this guy is going to be a hot commodity if Vancouver can't re-sign him. But if he makes it to July 1st, he should be high on the Penguins' priority list.
Yeah, again, if you can get 14 to 16 goals while he shoots anywhere in that 16 to 18%, just because I don't think he's going to shoot 21% again next season, I will gladly take that, considering how the Penguins' bottom six performed for the most part outside of Drew O'Connor and Lars Eller this past season. The Penguins badly need someone like that can give them some more scoring in their bottom two lines. And he has a really good knack for going to the net. I think back to game one against the Predators where I was watching that Canucks series, and the Canucks were down 2-1 in the third period. They get that tying goal, but then just 10 to 20 seconds later, Dakota Joshua is the one that breaks the tie. And you know where he is? 5 to 10 feet out, fires one top cheese past Yesie Puljujarvi. The Penguins need more players like that can go to those areas outside of Bunting and can just get greasy goals, and he would fit them like a glove.
He would. And our listeners know I've been saying this all postseason, and I'm going to keep saying it into the offseason. The pendulum in hockey is swinging back to it being more of a physical game. Again, to reiterate, not going back to the 80s and 90s where it's big guys who are big for no reason. It's big guys who can skate, big guys who have skill, but big guys who are not afraid to get nasty. And Dakota Joshua is all that. And again, I don't want to hype this guy up like he's the second coming, but for somebody to get in your bottom six, he's going to need a raise because he's making less than $1 million. And in the last 2 years, he has scored almost 30 goals. So he's going to figure to probably make somewhere between 2, 3, 4 million just because, and that all depends on term too. If it's shorter term, it's probably going to be on the higher end for AAV. If it's long term, it's going to be a little bit lower, but this is a guy who is going to be in demand this offseason because you look at the 4 teams that are left in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They are teams that, yeah, they have skill out the wazoo, but they are not afraid to play a greasy brand of hockey.
He will very much bring that physical element to the Penguins. He'll lay some big hits. If one of the stars also maybe is getting pushed around a little bit, I think he would jump right in there, just like you saw Bunting did towards the late stages of last season as well. Again, I'm not someone that is massive on this whole physical train, but I do think the Penguins need at least a little more of it heading into next season, as long as that player can actually play, and Joshua definitely can. I mean, you look at his data for this past season as well, Pat, 63 games, almost 750 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. When he was on the ice, the Canucks had 51% of the shot attempts, 35 goals for, 19 goals against. I know I'm not that big on plus minus, but plus 16 at 5-on-5, you're doing something right in that case. Also, a 56% expected goals rate, 53% of the scoring chances, and a whopping 59% of the high danger chances when he was on the ice. Underlines mostly very, very good this year. And yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about this player. If he gets to market, the Pittsburgh Penguins better be calling his representatives.
Absolutely. And I mean, I also think we should say this too. That's the archetype of player that they need to go after. And there's going to be a handful of them that make it to market or available via trade. So if they miss out on Dakota Joshua, you got to go for a guy like that. You look at a team, game 2 is tonight of Rangers Panthers, and the Panthers got the win despite it being 3-0 because they hemmed the Rangers in their own end. They had a heavy forecheck. They weren't afraid to be physical. They clogged up the neutral zone with good physicality, not a neutral zone trap. They met you at the point of attack and were able to disrupt their transition game. You need those kind of players in today's NHL if you want to be a successful team. So if they can get another good bottom 6 piece who plays that kind of game with a little bit of speed, a little bit of grit, a little bit of nastiness, I still like this team's chances to get back to the postseason should they make those moves this offseason.
I agree with you. And you've said they need more bastards on this team. Well, I'll take that a step further. They need more rats on this team. I think they really need that heading into next season, and they will have an opportunity to get one if he does get to market. But I think that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, Pat and I are going to continue our season in review series with forward Yesie Puljujarvi and what we expect from him heading into the 2024-2025 season. But before we get to that, we have to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. It's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job websites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform can help you do it all. They streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you match candidates, and with Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed data. It does the hard work for you. Indeed shows you candidates whose resumes on Indeed fits your description immediately after you post so you can hire faster. Indeed's hiring platform only matches you with quality candidates instantly, and even better, it's the only job website where you can pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer is good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit right now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So continuing with our season in review series, we're almost through most of the team, I would say. At this point, we only have a few more to go, but we're going to do Yesie Puljujarvi for today. Only played 22 games for the Penguins this year, 3 goals, 4 total points in those games. So you look at the counting stats, there's not too much there, but his underlyings were still fairly decent this season. Played 200 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time when he was on the ice. The Penguins had 51% of the shot attempts, 9 goals for, 7 goals against, 51% of the expected goals rate, 52% of the scoring chances, and 51% of the high danger chances. So mostly decent underlyings. The biggest thing with Puljujarvi, I just want to see Mike Sullivan play him more. I mean, he heading into next season, as of right now, he's easily one of their better bottom 6 options. He has a nice shot. He has shown an ability to go to the net. When I was watching some of his highlights from the World Championships, one of the goals that really stood out to me was him standing right in front of the net and getting a nice deflection goal in the round robin games. And he honestly had a really good World Championship for Finland before they were eliminated. In 8 games, 3 goals, 5 points. So he equaled the amount of goals that he scored with the Penguins in plenty fewer games. I know it's a different circumstance, but he still played fairly well for Finland overseas, and he should be very much penciled into the bottom 6 for next season. I think if he is fully healthy, this team can definitely get 10 to 12, maybe 13 goals out of him for next season. You think for this season, he was still making his way back from that massive double hip surgery. Now he has a full offseason to train. I think you're going to see a much better version from Puljujarvi next year.
I'm going to start here with Puljujarvi because I don't want this to come off as me being anti-analytics, because you guys who listen know that I'm not. But he's one of those classic players to me where the good analytics eventually have to start leading to results. I like his game. I like the way he plays. I said it after he played really well in one of those wins against the Hurricanes that he should have, and it ended up being the case, never be taken out of the lineup. But you look at the way he has trended for most of his career. Good puck possession player, good expected goals player. Counting stats aren't that great. And it's kind of a microcosm of the last few years of the Pittsburgh Penguins. All of their analytics say they should be one of the better teams in the NHL, but then you get to the end of the season and they're either just squeaking into the playoffs, or for the last 2 years they've missed. Eventually, Puljujarvi has to take that next step. He's 26. He had major surgery, so he's on the recovery table. Eventually, he's got to take a step here. I'm not saying he's got to become a 30, 35 goal scorer, but 15 to 20, eventually that step has to come. Because, again, I like the way he plays. I like that he goes to the net. I like that he plays fast. He has a very sneaky good shot, but eventually that has to turn into goals. And I think should Kyle Dubas retool this bottom six the way he needs to, and Mike Sullivan finally starts to consistently use Puljujarvi, we will see a good season out of him. But until he does that, I'm still a tad skeptical of him to play that role. So we will see. But overall, he's on a very affordable deal. He's a good bottom six option. And if it doesn't work this year, you can move on.
Right. And you said it about Mike Sullivan as well. He's got to stop benching him after the smallest of mistakes. That's been another one of my gripes when it comes to Sullivan over the last year and a half, is when one of the younger players makes a mistake, he staples them to the bench, but yet one of the veterans makes a mistake that's not one of the core players, I should say, or someone that's not in the top six, that player keeps playing. So I just want to see him treat that type of player the way he treats veterans overall. He just needs more playing time. And another thing I think Puljujarvi also needs, he needs a third line center that can get him the puck. I think, he's not someone I feel like that's going to create a lot of his offense on his own. I think he needs someone that can, be a good playmaker on his line to get him the puck where he can use his shot. We all know Puljujarvi down low is a good forechecker, but off the rush, that's not really his game per se. So I also think he needs a little bit of help for whatever line he's on. I mean, right now, looking at this lineup as we stand today, I see him as someone who can play on the third line. Yeah, in spurts, you can put him into your top six for a few games if injuries arise, but he serves this team better as a third liner, or even maybe as a fourth liner. But that's the biggest thing I think Puljujarvi needs heading into next season.
And to what you said, it's not that he can't score off the rush, but and again, I'm not comparing him to this player. He's not like a Phil Kessel kind of player who can just skate it down the wing and fire one past the goalie. He can score off the rush if he's the guy riding shotgun, if he's the guy who pulls the defenseman back closer to the net to open up that space, or if he's the guy doing the center lane drive and gets the tap in. But like you said, he needs another center or another player on his line to drive said possession and make said pass. So that's how you have to utilize him. If you're expecting him, because I think he had one goal off the rush this year of the 3 he scored, and it was more or less a broken play. Yeah. The Penguins turned something quick in the neutral zone, and he was able to take advantage of a numbers game, but that's not something that's going to happen consistently with him. So if you can get a good or better third line center for him, or at the very least another playmaker on that line, and he's riding shotgun with them, you're going to see more production out of him. But you can't depend upon him to run the third line himself. Otherwise, you're going to get this same kind of outcome you got this year, where he only scores a handful of points.
Yeah, if he's the one running the show on the third line, you have bigger problems in your bottom six overall. You need to get him some help if you want this experiment to work. But for my overall grade, I've been kind of going back and forth on this. It's hard to fully grade him just because he only played in a little over 20 games this year. So, B minus, C, somewhere in there. I'm not going to give him an F or a D. I don't really think that's fair, but I think a B minus to a C is a fine range for his grade.
I mean, I'm going to go incomplete just because, one, he was in and out of the lineup so much that he never really got any kind of consistency. And that kind of leads into my last point about him. I think next year we're going to see more from him regardless of what happens around him, because he will be more comfortable. He'll be with the team from training camp all the way through, barring some kind of trade. And you could kind of tell there was a little bit of uncomfortability this season, strictly because he joins late. He took the majority of the first half of the season to recover from a massive surgery, and then he's in and out of the lineup. So I think if you can give him a little bit more consistency, just strictly through the fact that he's going to be with the team for a full season, he's going to do a little bit better, and we can get a better feel for his game.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, but I think that'll do it for this second segment of today's episode. Coming up to end the show, Brayden Yager will be playing in the Memorial Cup for Moose Jaw tonight against Saginaw. Pat and I are going to look at the Memorial Cup and just do a small preview to end the show. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our next sponsor, which is FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So the Memorial Cup gets all underway on Friday night with Moose Jaw going up against the Saginaw Spirit. I'm really excited for this game. If you look at these four teams overall, Saginaw is quote unquote the worst team of the four, but they are still very, very good. They're deep. I'm going to have you get into the goalie situation in just a second because the goalie they have is very good. But you look at this roster and this team won 50 games. They won their division. They had the second most points in the OHL. They went to their conference championship. This is not going to be an easy game for Moose Jaw. If you look at these two teams, I think Moose Jaw is more top heavy than Saginaw. Saginaw is the deeper team overall with players like Joey Willis, Josh Bloom, Owen Beck, etc. But I want to have you discuss the goalie because he is going to be really hard to beat for Moose Jaw in this one.
Yeah, so Saginaw, as Hunter said, is the host team this year, so they get their automatic bid to the Memorial Cup tournament. For those who don't know, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, the CHL, this is their premier tournament. This is basically their, for lack of a better term, to Americanize it, their college football playoff. But it's a little bit different. This isn't an actual playoff. It's a round-robin tournament where you play each team, and then whoever has the two best teams from that round-robin go on to play, or they have a semifinal and then a final based on points percentage or points, and then there's a tiebreaker if necessary. So that's how that all works. And you look at Saginaw's goalie. This is a wild thing to talk about because this kid is Andrew Oak. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He had a very inauspicious season for Saginaw. 29, 10-1 record, 289 goals against average, and an 890 save percentage. But then came the OHL playoffs for Saginaw, and he turned into a monster. He won 5 games. He had a 1.83 GAA and a 938 save percentage. So when the lights came on for this kid, he showed up. And at this point, I agree with what you're saying about this matchup tonight. I would say the best way to put it, Moose Jaw has the better top-end talent. Saginaw is the deeper team. So this is the kind of game where all the guys we've talked about on Moose Jaw, including Brayden Yager, have to impose their will on Saginaw, or they could be in for a rough game. And again, with Oak in net for Saginaw, that is what I always call the great X factor. We have seen it as Penguins fans forever. A hot goaltender can derail the hopes of a really good team.
This just means we got to have Yager and Furcus cook a lot more in this game. They're going to have to be at their very best if Moose Jaw wants to win this one against Saginaw. So I'm looking forward to watching it. And this is the type of game, again, we've talked about this on the show a couple of times, that can really help young players with their development before they get to the NHL. Playing in this type of environment is only going to make you better in the long haul. And with how Yager played in the WHL playoffs, I don't think this moment is too big for him.
It's not. He has shown that when the games get bigger, he elevates his game. And there's no bigger stage in juniors than the Memorial Cup. And the game that and as much as I am looking forward to tonight's game, the game that I've got circled in red Sharpie, underlined 4 times, is Monday night. It's 7:30 when Moose Jaw takes on the London Knights. And if you know anything about junior hockey, the London Knights, again, to Americanize this, they are the New York Yankees of junior hockey. They are always one of the best teams. And I want to see how Yager responds to playing a team like that on this big of a stage.
It also kind of sounds like Alabama of college football, especially when Nick Saban was there and winning all those national championships. So
yeah, Mark Hunter has the London Knights as one of the best junior teams. They are incredibly well run. They get some of the best talent to come through the CHL. And if you don't have them penciled in as a favorite every year, I don't know what hockey you're watching, man.
I think if you look at the 4 teams right now, it's hard to not say that the London Knights are the favorite, because I think they should be. When you look at up and down that team with how much skill they have, they're going to be really hard to beat in this tournament. And you brought up Mark Hunter there. I wonder when he's going to get his next NHL gig, because I feel like that's coming, right?
It has to. I mean, he has such a good track record. And if you see him getting back to the NHL, I would imagine it's more in a front office capacity than a coaching capacity, just because he has an unbelievable talent of developing guys into not just good NHL players, but great NHL players. I mean, you look at some of the alumni to come out of London. I mean, it's just star after star after star. Patrick Kane, Mitch Marner, going even further back, Brendan Shanahan. These are guys who went on to have some of the best NHL careers. And you can talk about their perceived lack of success when you talk about a guy like Marner, but all the grief he's taking, you telling me you wouldn't take a guy who scores like that on your team? I sure would.
Oh, I agree with you. I 100% would as well. But if you want to watch Moose Jaw up against Saginaw on Friday, that game starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see how Yager performs in the Memorial Cup. One more thing before we end today's show. Conference finals have gotten underway in the NHL. I was really impressed with the way the Panthers played in game 1. I haven't seen the Rangers limited like that in a very long time. The Panthers are so stingy in their own zone. Bobrovsky also played a great game in net. The Panthers are getting contributions from everyone in their lineup. Game 2 is set for Friday night at 8 o'clock at the Garden, and it's basically a must-win for the Rangers. I don't think they want to go back to Sunrise down 0-2 in this series. And then Edmonton, Dallas, the Oilers showed me something in game 1. The way they were defending the Stars was very impressive. It's a very un-Oilers-like win. It's because when you think of the Oilers, you think high-flying offense, but they were defending with a purpose in that game 1 against the Stars. And the Stars had plenty of chances to win it in overtime, especially on that 4-minute power play. Robertson hit a post. He also hit a crossbar. And the Stars, I like how they're committed to the bit of losing every single game 1 known to man, but I still think that's going to go 6 to 7 games. But these 2 conference finals so far, a lot of fun to watch.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I kind of hinted at it earlier with the Rangers. I liked their game. The score was not indicative of the result. I think that was a very evenly played game, and the Rangers don't have to change a lot. I know that there's been a lot of discourse amongst a lot of people about whether they should bring in Rempe or not. I don't think he makes a difference. They just got to stick to what they're doing. And you think about it, one of the goals they had an empty net goal. They had a goal that Shesterkin rarely ever gives up. And then the second goal was tipped in by Lafreniere on a broken play. Like, you look at that game, if you're the Rangers, and you think, hey, we're right with them. We don't have to change a whole lot. We just got to make some changes on the margins. And as for the Oilers, man, we said it on the show. Sneakily good defensive team. You don't think of defense when you think of the Edmonton Oilers, especially with the Connor McDavid era, but they hung right with Dallas, and that is going to be another phenomenal series, because if there's one thing Dallas has shown throughout this postseason, they bounce back like none other. That is a team that can take a punch and give it right back in the next game.
Yeah, I mean, they were down 0-2 to Vegas in the first round. They come back and win 4 of the next 5 in that series. They lost game 1 against Avalanche. They come back and win that series in 6 games. So the Stars are no strangers to starting slow in a bunch of series.
They're just pulling a 1991 Penguins. They're going to lose every game 1 en route to the Stanley Cup.
they they really do love losing all these game ones. It is quite funny, but that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with another show for you all on Monday. So hope you all have a very good holiday weekend. We will talk with you all on Monday.